Has Donald Trump's policy of imposing trade tariffs worked? He signed a major trade deal with Japan, with Tokyo pledging to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in the US. Could this open the way for similar deals with other countries? And how could it affect the global economy? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Adrian Finighan. Donald Trump promised to shake up global trade, and he says that's now paying off. The US has signed an investment deal with Japan worth more than $500 billion. That follows Washington's new trade agreements with the Philippines and Indonesia, all touted as wins by the administration from Trump's policy of applying pressure through tariffs. But are these short-term gains that could mask longer-term risks? Some economists warn that Trump's approach is fueling global market instability, weakening alliances and raising costs for businesses and consumers. And many are questioning how sustainable this kind of deal-making really is. So, are these tariffs working? And who's winning and who's losing? We'll discuss all that in a moment. But first, a report from Victoria Gatenby.
President Donald Trump is deepening US trade ties with one of its most powerful allies in Asia. Japan has agreed to invest $550 billion in the United States. Both countries will pay a tariff of 15% on each other's goods.
I just signed the largest trade deal in history, I think maybe the largest deal in history, with Japan. And that was done with Japan. They had their top people here, and we worked on it long and hard, and it's a great deal for everybody.
Japan has long run a trade surplus with the US, selling more cars and electronics to America than it buys in return. Trump threatened to raise tariffs from 2.5% to 25%, putting billions of dollars in Japanese exports at risk unless Tokyo agreed to a new deal. The Prime Minister was under growing domestic pressure to sign an agreement with the US after the ruling party lost its majority in Parliament this week.
We have agreed to halve the additional 25% rate imposed since April this year on motor vehicles and automotive parts. It brings the total, including the existing rate, to 15%.
The agreement with Japan follows others made by the US with the Philippines and Indonesia. Supporters of President Trump credit his strategy of leveraging through tariffs. In April, he announced a 10% levy on goods from most trading partners, but later suspended it for 90 days to allow time for negotiations. President Trump has said new deals must now be agreed by other trading partners by August, or the US will impose more sweeping tariffs. China has accused the US of politicizing trade.
China's always advocated resolving economic and trade differences through dialogue and consultation in order to maintain a sound international business and trade environment.
With trade tensions running high between the US and China, the European Union is working to secure a deal of its own. But it says President Trump's preference for bilateral deals undermines the rule-based international trading system.
We believe in global competitiveness, and it should benefit everyone. That's why Europe is stepping up cooperation, not only to defend open trade, but to shape it.
The White House says results matter more than rules, but some warn that rewriting global trade through power politics undermines a system meant to protect everyone. Victoria Gatenby, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guests. Joining us from Tokyo is Tomohiko Taniguchi, Special Advisor at the Fujitsu Future Studies Center and former Special Advisor to the Cabinet of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. From Washington, D.C., we're joined by Eric Ham, a political analyst and author known for works on U.S. foreign and trade policy. He's also a former U.S. congressional staffer. And from Rome, we're joined by Nathalie Tocci, Director of the Instituto Affari Internazionali, a specialist on EU foreign policy and former Special Advisor to EU High Representative Federica Mogherini and Joseph Borrell. Welcome to you all. Let's start with you, Tomohiko. President Trump says that it's a great deal for everybody. But is it a good deal for Japan? Has it stood up to Trump and got the best possible deal here?
I don't know if this is the best deal, but better than the worst. They were talking about imposing 25% of tariffs on everything that Japan is going to sell to the United States. Particularly, the matter of concern was about the automotive trade. Now, 25% rate has been reduced to 15%. I'm not sure if this is something we should rejoice at, because previously the tariffs over automotive trade were just 2.5%. Now it's 15%. I think it is a pledge, rather, on the part of Japan to help support the reindustrialization, may I say so, of the United States. And $550 billion investment that Japan has also pledged would be used primarily to help build defense-related industries. So basically, this plan on the part of Japan would be to make America great again.
Okay. Why would Japan want to do that? As you say, this is a pledge to help support the reindustrialization of the United States. The Prime Minister in Japan recently pointed out that Japan is already the largest foreign investor in the US, its biggest contributor in terms of job creation. He said that he hoped that would all be taken into consideration by the Trump administration. I mean, do the terms of this deal suggest that it has been taken into consideration?
This deal is going to make Japan by far the largest investor, that is to say, the stakeholder of the United States. If the United States were a big corporation, it's safe to say that Japan is going to be the largest shareholder. And that's going to have grave, important geostrategic concern. So make no mistake that the United States and Japan will continue to work as an alliance partner. So that's a political implication.
Eric, every trade deal that Trump makes comes with a minimum baseline tariff. That's ultimately a tax on American consumers, meaning higher and not lower prices. Do American consumers, you think, realize that?
I think they do. In fact, we know that the Trump administration has really gone after major corporations for actually suggesting that. We know that he's gone after corporations such as Amazon and Walmart for making that clear. In addition to that, we know that the president ran on this signature campaign policy that he would actually be able to lower prices and that he could actually battle inflation. But what we're seeing with these baseline tariffs that the president is now pushing for in all of these trade deals, what that means is that will just make prices higher for American consumers as well as goods. And quite frankly, we know that's actually going to run up against the wall. Already we're seeing a lot of pushback from consumers on a lot of these trade policies. And as we just heard from your previous guest, while Japan is actually investing heavily in the United States, this is a deal that has both give and take, because while it is providing enormous investment, we're seeing that with these baseline tariffs of 15%, that's a tax increase, quite frankly, on American consumers from the original baseline of 2.5% to 15%. So it's an actual increase for U.S. consumers, not something that you really want to tout, particularly when you run on this idea that you could actually lower, not raise prices and inflation.
How, Eric, is this helping the U.S. economy? To what extent is President Trump possibly shooting himself in the foot here?
I think he is. In fact, we know that even when the president announced these Liberation Day tariffs back in April, we have seen the moniker attached to the president, Trump always chickens out. And we've also seen the president walk back these tariffs time and time again. And now we're seeing once again that there's this deadline of August 1st for additional tariffs to go into effect. And we know now the president is pushing for deadline for countries, remaining countries, to actually meet that deadline. But again, will Donald Trump actually go through with these tariffs? We have seen both markets as well as the business react negatively as a result of these tariffs. And so while this is certainly, I think, a signature policy of the president, going all the way back to the 80s, in fact, where Donald Trump believes that tariffs are the way to enact major foreign and economic policy, they simply have not shown themselves to actually be a benefit either to the coffers of the United States or to businesses and, of course, consumers, both in the United States and abroad.
Nathalie, the clock is ticking for Europe, as it was for Japan before they reached a deal with the US. Where does this leave Europe? Is it going to follow Japan's lead and pledge massive sums of money in return for lower tariffs, or will it stand its ground and perhaps look for better trade partnerships elsewhere in the world?
Well, I mean, I think, your question has the answer within it. I think, what we have learned so far is, I think, sort of three sets of things. I mean, the first is that when we are in a situation in which the United States is able to deal with its different partners in a hub and spoke way, it is generally, not always, because I think there's a China exception here, but it's generally able to clinch deals which are, at the very least, very unfavorable for the partners. And this is obviously because the bargaining power between the two is quite unbalanced. So that's, in a sense, one thing that we are learning. And I think it's true for Japan, has been true for Vietnam, has been true for the United Kingdom. I mean, what we've seen, Indonesia, you name it. So that's one implication. Second implication is that size and weight matters. The one country which has actually managed to get a deal, which is generally speaking, I would say more favorable to it rather than to the United States, is actually China. Now, it's not a deal, it's a truce. But I think arguably because China has actually, in a sense, kept its back very straight, it has actually been able to secure a deal that is probably more advantageous to Beijing than to Washington. And then I think the third implication of all of this, which comes to the last bit of your question, is that what the United States is doing is, in a sense, destroying the system, right? I mean, it's destroying the system of free trade that it had helped promote and build. And so I think that as far as Europe is concerned, all these three implications have European implications. I mean, it basically means a bit as a la China. Either we stand up with our back straight, and we can only do it if we stand united, or we're going to get into pretty bad deals like Japan or the United Kingdom or Vietnam. And second implication is that in order to actually strengthen that bargaining position, not only do we have to be united internally as Europeans, but we actually have to reach out to our trading partners like Japan, like Indonesia, I think the proposal that Commission President von der Leyen made to the CPTPP, the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, is an extremely interesting one to try and explore alternatives to the WTO, given that the WTO is blocked and has been blocked actually for quite a long time by the United States itself.
Okay, we're going to talk more about the WTO and Trump's desire, it seems, to overturn the world order. But first, Tomohiko, included in this deal was this $500 billion investment pledge by Japan. Was that a sweetener? Trump says that 90% of the profit will stay in the US. What's that money going to be spent on, and by whom? Does Japan have any control over how it's used?
Those are the details that still are very much unclear. But investment is investment that you can expect to get returns in the long run. That's number one. Number two, the areas that the United States is hinting that the money is going to be spent on are all strategically important areas. Shipbuilding, for instance, semiconductor, mining, and all those areas are the ones that the United States is urgently keen to reinvest and strengthen again. And I think it's going to help also the position of the United States that is vitally important still to maintain the order, the order of the Indo-Pacific region. And Japan has got a huge stake in maintaining that order again. One note about CPTPP. I think it's very much important for the EU and Japan and other CPTPP members to start thinking about combining European economy and the CPTPP. So it's going to widen the capitalist, freedom-loving, liberal international trading regime. And that's going to give a huge economy of scale to all the members.
Eric, as Tomohiko was saying, the detail is yet to come out about how this $500 billion is going to be used. But as we were saying earlier, foreign direct investment by the US, in the US rather, by Japan has always been strong. This $500 billion commitment, though, this investment is untested. Now, reports say that Howard Lutnick's Commerce Department will oversee how it's spent but the details are yet to be finalized. I mean, is that going to ring alarm bells? Should it ring alarm bells about presidential discretion, foreign capital, a lack of transparency?
I think it should even go beyond that. In fact, when we look at these trade deals, and also when you just look at how trade deals are put together, implemented, and also the timing of them, oftentimes they take years. In fact, most of the times they may move even through multiple presidential administrations. And the fact that we're seeing these trade deals that are coming together so quickly and with so little detail, I think it requires us in the media to actually dig deeper in terms of what are the details and, more importantly, what is being offered and what are the commitments that we're seeing through them. I do want to go back to what we have heard from both the guests in terms of where President Trump is right now. It's been stated that, for example, Japan has a desire to maintain the economic and trade structure that we're seeing, but Donald Trump simply does not. And quite frankly, what we're seeing right now is a president who is upending, more than 6 or 7 decades of trade policies that the United States, quite frankly, has been at the forefront of. And I think that's what we're seeing play out right now, is a president who is, quite frankly, destroying the economic global order that we're seeing in place right now. And also a president who is moving to alienate partners and allies. And quite frankly, what that is doing is providing opportunity for competitors to the United States, namely China, which we know is attempting to get closer and closer to Canada as the president is looking to, again, upend 60 years of economic integration between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And this is also, I think, creating vulnerabilities for the United States. And that's something that both the White House as well as Congress should be deeply concerned about.
Nathalie, where does all of this leave the WTO, and how is the Trump administration able to reach trade deals so quickly? I mean, in the past, they took months or years to negotiate and often involved the World Trade Organization as arbitrator. Is throwing out the rules-based approach to trade a good thing? Did they need overhauling, or is Trump just a bully whose actions may yet come back to haunt him and the US and its consumers?
Right. So, in fact, obviously these are trade deals, if one is to define them this way. They're not free trade agreements. What takes years of meticulous negotiations is, reaching a free trade agreement. And whether that is in a bilateral context or in a multilateral context, this is what has been painstakingly built over many decades. What doesn't take a long time to negotiate is a almost unilateral trade deal that is not a deal, that is essentially imposed through brute force, and often actually waging as sticks issues that have nothing to do with trade, like, for instance, defense. So why is the United States able to do this? Well, it's able to do this precisely, and this is the paradox, precisely because it had benefited from that system that it had built and led for many, many years and decades, right? I mean, there was a reason why the United States was leading that system, and it was because it benefited the United States, which is why now it can actually it can wield disproportionate power within it. But then, of course, once you break it, right? And once you break it, inevitably, whereas it may look like you can reap a short-term gain from it, in the medium to long term, inevitably it's going to trigger reactions. And for example, what Europeans may be doing together with Asian partners is part of that reaction, which inevitably is going to ultimately lead to a system plurilateral or multilateral, which is actually going to see the United States in a much weaker position because it won't have been an architect of that alternative system.
Tomohiko, is this deal going to save or see off Prime Minister Ishiba?
It's going to be very much different whether Mr. Ishiba is going to be remaining as Prime Minister is going to be totally a function of intra-party dynamics now playing out in Tokyo. It is not even a national drama. It is a intra-party drama. So the fact that Ishiba has made this deal possible will have, unfortunately for him, very little effect on what fate is going to visit Mr. Ishiba.
Okay. Tomohiko, some estimates say that this deal could wipe half a percentage point off Japan's GDP, recovering it as it is from years of moribund growth or stagnation even. Can Japan's economy afford that? And can the Prime Minister, even if he's not long for office, can he afford to make that kind of decision that will affect Japan's long-term future?
I still don't know, but if the stock market's response is any guide, it seems that investors and industrialists in Japan and abroad have seen this deal as a net positive to Japanese economy. And one shouldn't forget that Japan is reliant on trade, external trade, much, much less, for instance, than Germany is. So estimates vary, but we will see the Japanese corporate profits have gone up quite dramatically. There is going to be a thicker cushion, if you like, than usual going forward.
Eric, US car makers are not happy with this deal. Has President Trump sold them out?
Well, look, President Trump has been selling out the auto industry since he came back into office with these trade deals. We have to remember, in the United States, the automotive industry accounts for nearly 10% of GDP. And so that's a huge, huge number and a huge impact on not only the U.S. economy, but also the global economy. And what we're seeing here is supply chains upended and, of course, deals and operations, particularly when you look at how the United States is integrated into the entirety of North America, from both Mexico to Canada, and how parts move back and forth. So we're talking goods, services, and the like. And right now, what we're seeing here is when you see companies, for example, like General Motors, that is suffering a heavy loss. This will have a tremendous impact, not just on those companies directly, but also many of the suppliers. And what we're seeing here is just a very precarious economy that is being shaped by this White House as it impacts these tariffs. And right now, President Trump is doing, I think, a very remarkable job in touting and marketing these trade deals. But what we're seeing is, at least under the hood, proverbially, this is having a tremendous impact on the economy and, more importantly, workers and jobs.
Nathalie, as we said, the clock is ticking for the EU to reach a deal with the US. While EU member states disagree over many aspects of foreign policy, are they at least going to be able to stand united against the US on trade?
Well, I mean, ultimately, yes and no, in the sense that, yes, there is going to be a united European position because on trade issues, as opposed to foreign policy, security and defense, there is a majority voting within the European Union. Essentially, this is an exclusive EU competence. So, yes, there will be one position. The question, though, is that one position is going to be inevitably the product of a compromise. And of course, what we're seeing in Europe is that there are different views on this particular question. And it is no surprise that those countries that tend to be more, in the sense, Trump-friendly, because they are countries whose governments are from the right or the far right, are those pushing for a more conciliatory tone? And so this is, in a sense, again, another paradox, because these are presumably more nationalist governments, but they're actually doing the bidding of another country, the United States. And so the risk that we have at the moment is basically that of a united EU position, which is rather weak rather than strong, and therefore that it's going to end up with a deal which is more akin to that of Japan than, for example, that of China.
Tomohiko, coming back to the question I put to you a few moments ago, is there a danger that this could push Japan back into recession?
I frankly don't think so. The business condition has been improved quite dramatically over the last couple of years since the pandemic ended. And one final note, if I could add, is that I personally don't see the United States is bullying others because it is a hegemon. I think the United States under Donald Trump is feeling that it is losing ground. It is losing competitiveness. It is losing competitiveness, especially vis-a-vis China. So it needs money. It needs capital to reinvest into those critical areas. The famous military-industrial complex, I think, is in tatters. And there, Tokyo, I think, has agreed on jointly strengthening the industrial base of the United States.
Okay, and Eric, one final question to you. Bearing in mind what Tomohiko and Nathalie were saying, are Trump's economic policies helping or hindering the U.S. economy right now?
Well, I think both short-term and long-term. Short-term, I don't think they're doing much to actually boost the economy because, again, when we're talking about tariffs, we're talking about taxes. And so that certainly isn't helping consumers and it's not helping businesses. And while the president is rightfully looking at this ongoing competition with China, particularly over rare earth minerals, this is still a fight that the United States continues to lose. And these trade deals are not helping the United States either long-term or short-term. And right now, what we're seeing here is, while the president is certainly upending this entire geopolitical space right now, I don't think it's being done in the benefit of the United States. And I think that's going to hurt the president politically as well.
There, I'm afraid we must end it. Many thanks indeed for being with us. Tomohiko Taniguchi, Eric Ham and Nathalie Tocci. And thank you for watching. You can see the programme again at any time by going to the website at aljazeera.com. For further discussion, join us at our Facebook page at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And of course, you can join the conversation on X. Our handle there is at AJ Inside Story. From me, Adrian, Finighan, and the team here in Doha. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again. Bye for now.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.